Hello, and thanks for joining us on the podcast that discusses all things gaming. Coming to you from the home of Gen Con and the gaming capital of the world, this is The Established Facts.
Hello everybody, this is Josh. I want to thank you for listening to us on episode 49. This episode's a little bit different. A few of us went to Fear the Con, which I'm sure you guys were aware of, following us along, seeing the different posts and so forth. It was an excellent convention. I hope everyone gets to go next year. They're talking about a June Fear the Con 7, so just start planning and be prepared. What this is every year they do a get-together with other podcasters, and we talk about kind of the ins and outs of what it means to be a podcast. And we talked for like 3 or 4 hours, and I only grabbed about an hour of it. So for those of you that are interested in what it means to kind of start a podcast, especially a podcast about gaming, some of the struggles that we go with, it's kind of a more of an in-depth look as to what it means to do a podcast. We really look forward to our episode 50, which will be releasing within the coming weeks. And I hope that you've enjoyed the ride with us. Gen Con's coming up soon, and we're very thankful for all 100 plus likes on Facebook, 100 plus subscribers we have through FeedBurner, and most importantly, the multitude of others who are there and supporting us, both in spirit, on Facebook, in forum groups, whatever that is. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy this unique look at podcasting.
All right, so let's start the same way we did last year. Let's do a kind of just quick introduction of everyone's here, who you are, what you're doing, or what you're attempting to do. Then maybe what we can do is identify the areas of where we really need help or want input or whatever, and if it seems to be pretty consistent, then we can talk as a group. If it's not, then we do what we did last year and split off into subgroups to focus on specific areas. So obviously, I'm Dan Fear the Boot, started the podcast in...
Your food has arrived, so...
I didn't order anything.
Really?
No. That's yours. I didn't order any of that. I mean, if you're bringing me free food, I'll eat it. I'm not against the cheesy brat.
Okay, what did you order?
Nothing. I just came up there to talk to you about something else.
She said it was you. And I was like, oh, he's in the room. Wait.
There's another Dan here.
There's another Dan here.
I didn't order it either.
How many Dans are in this convention?
I'll eat a cheesy brat if you're just looking to offload it. Dan Fear the Boot. Fear the Boot itself started, first recording was in May of 2006, or was released in May of 2006. I actually got my start with podcasting in early to mid 2005, doing a human resources podcast, or helping produce it, I guess. I was not on it, but I was helping produce it. Realized it was an enormous amount of fun, and thought, wow, if you can have fun with human resources, you can have fun with anything. And realized video games was an entirely oversaturated field, and I had no hope of competing with voices like IGN and 1UP and Penny Arcade, so I went with RPGs instead, which I think really was a better fit for me anyway in many ways. But that is the only podcast I've been directly involved with. I've been tangentially involved with a variety of shows and whatnot, but that's really been the big thing.
I'm Josh with The Established Facts. We got started in July of 2011, so we're still kind of the babies on the block, I guess. Not completely, but whatever. I have a master's in music technology and have student loans to help me pay for the free podcast. Ultimately, that's what it was. A group of guys, we got together every weekend and just sat for hours talking about video games, board games, card games, played games. We did all of these in general. It was just kind of like, why don't we put this down and see if anybody gives a crap what we want to talk about? Evidently, some people give a crap what we want to talk about, so we're still here. So, it's been a pretty neat little process, and I got to give a lot of thanks to that Derek, Fear the Boot, these guys, because they they got it started, and somebody's like, hey, why don't you talk to these guys? And now they've helped get us more listeners, and some of us show up on other shows. You know, what? Oh, don't give me that. We have our own little personal rivalry going. It's pretty funny.
It is pretty funny. I'm Peter. I'm one of the 3 hosts on Saving the Game. I got roped into it by Grant Woodward, who you know as Saragon from the forums a while ago. It's a podcast about Christianity and gaming and the relationship that they have to each other. We actually had Dan on as a guest host once, which we were very grateful for. We're really new on the block. We started in 2012, so he's a toddler, we're an infant. We just came out of mine.
I remember watching it happen in Grant's head.
Yeah, we're only up to 18 episodes, last I checked, which was about 5 minutes ago, unless Brandon dropped it. 19 in the last minute. So I'm just here to be a sponge, basically.
I'm Keith. I'm one of the hosts on the Kicked in the Dice Bags Players Edition podcast. We were a podcast. The Players Edition came about from Christopher Mays. He was looking for new hosts. Dan shouted it out on Fear to Boot, because I'm a big Fear to Boot listener. I was like, hey, I've done smidgens of podcasts in the past. I'm going to see if I can get hooked up with a more established cast and see where that goes. And that was back in November of 2010 when we kind of got started doing the reboot of Kicked in the Dice Bags. If you're not familiar with the history of Kicked in the Dice Bags, Chris Mays and Jonathan Landreth started the show, and it was more of a after hours, a little bit more loose on the format, to say the least. And a little bit less clean, cursing, stuff like that. And when players,
less clean,
a little less clean.
There's a variable here. Less oh my God, not clean.
I'm trying.
That is about a pound and a half of dirty diaper right there.
Yeah, pretty much. That is a good analogy.
There's also an interesting case study in that. Do you know how that podcast started?
Do I know how my own podcast started?
No.
Well, the original iteration of it, not how it
became.
The original Kicked
the
Dice
original
Bags.
Kicked in the Dice Bag started, because there's an interesting sort of.
You said this last year.
I'll come back to that because there's
because it started as a way for hosts to kind of come to this show from
sort of I'll come back
as an outlet of some sort. But anyways, we've established barely a format to it, cleaned it up a little bit. We still curse and say dirty jokes and stuff like that, but it's not as bad as it got.
You don't have a porn star as one of your hosts. You cleaned it up.
Well, supposedly we got that cosplayer as a host, that Lily Spitfire, but she's been on one show, but Adam still insists she's a host, and I'm like, okay. But yeah, so Players Edition.
I'm Silas McNutcase on the forums. I am not currently a podcaster, so I'm kind of here to be a sponge, pick up tips for if and when I get into podcasting.
All right, I'm Alex. I listen to podcasts. It's what I do. I'm also a sponge, I guess. I'm not even on the forums. I'm really lazy. This is why I want IRC. I can just chat with people while they're right there.
I'm Jamie, and I didn't even know what RPG was until yesterday. So
wow.
So
Sacrifice the virgin.
Calm down, Sergeant. Calm down.
So I wrote.
Not anymore. You would have had to have gotten to her yesterday.
I roped my friend Jamie into this, and I had told her that it was a tabletop role-playing game convention, and she interpreted that to mean tabletop computer. Some kind of computer games are going to be going on.
That'd be a desktop role-playing.
yeah, totally missed.
Though you can play a tabletop on a desktop.
Yes, you can.
In Portal or something.
Yeah.
I'm Rob. I am on the Dungeons and Randomness podcast. It's an actual play D&D 4th edition podcast. We started last year, and so I'm a player. I don't do any of the editing or GMing or anything. But in addition to that, I'm also running a Twitch TV live stream, live gameplay, twice to 4 times a week, and doing some video blogging on YouTube.
I'm Sergeant Dan, and I'm just here to make sure y'all behave.
You just need to leave.
My name is Steve. I'm on the forums. I'm Runester. I'm one of the hosts of Postcards from the Dungeon. I think we're about 3 years old or something. We're at episode 105. So,
My name is Allison. I'm Velma on the forums, and I'm not that active on the forums, but I'm here to learn about podcasting.
Let me tell you two things about podcasting. One, time is your enemy. And I don't mean that just in terms of the time you spend to create a podcast, because it is, for those doing it, it's more than you expect it to be. It takes long to record, to edit, to manage the community, whatever. What I mean by time is your enemy is because of the fact that none of us are doing it as a career, and even if you look at your career, how long does it take you when you start a new job, you get burned out on that job? The average fan effort will die during its second year, typically right around the 18-month mark. This, you can almost set your watch to. If you look at the vast majority of blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, whatever, they will last somewhere between the 1 and 2 year mark, and that's where the vast majority of them will die. That's why podcast years like dog years. You make it to that, you finish out your second year and are still going strong into a third year, you have already beaten the odds. One of the things that has helped put Fear the Boot where it is simply persistence. It's the fact that we just keep coming back. A laundry list of shows have come and gone since we started, and that has added a lot to our inertia. The second thing I want to talk about is there's one thing that when a new podcast is starting up is one of the most critical questions that you have to answer, and it doesn't have a right answer, which is, what is this show going to be about? What are we going to do with this show? Because here's the thing. There are two ways to approach that question, and both of them are equally right and may give you contradictory answers. That's what I said, there's not necessarily a right way to answer this question. If you pick something that nobody else is doing, a specific angle, you may be picking a niche that either is A, not that large to begin with, or B, is simply not going to be all that interesting to that many people. The other thing that you can look at is you can say, well, forget whether people will tune in or not, what do we enjoy doing? So you look at either what will people tune into, or what do we want to produce? And those may or may not be the same thing. Which is why you kind of have to ask yourself this question of, why am I podcasting? What is it I get out of this? Do I just enjoy recording the episodes? Am I trying to build listenership? Is it really more about the entertainment than how many people tune in? Is it an outlet to some kind of secondary success somewhere else? I brought the story of Kicked in the Dice Bags because Kicked in the Dice Bags, as it was intended to occur, never happened. What Kicked in the Dice Bags was supposed to be, as Chris Mace originally envisioned it, was what he wanted was he saw there was this whole culture of people that make things that are about RPGs. They make the blogs, they make the podcasts, they make the games themselves. And everybody, whenever they're doing what they have to do, they have to keep up a sort of persona. You know, they have rules about their podcast. For example, Fear the Boot's apolitical, areligious. We bleep out the swears. We try to keep things generally, even when we're not bleeping out, PG-13-ish sort of in rating. When people go out and make games for game companies, you know, they're at Gen Con, well, they can't go off on a past employer or whatever. And so the idea of Kicked in the Dice Bags was to create this sort of evening lounge where basically the people that do these things, like let's say I'm just really mad about something that I would never talk about on Fear the Boot, like I just want to go off on something, I could go over there and give kind of a more honest look at who I am and what's really on my mind than I give on my own show. And the idea is what's going to do is for bloggers, podcasters, game developers, game marketers, all these people, and it never happened. Because what happened was John Landreth came along and decided he just wanted toilet hour, and unfortunately Chris kind of let him run with that. And then after that, John Landreth left, and then a second group came and took it over, and did more of a kind of traditional sort of roundtable RPG discussion. So the Kick in the Dice Bags, as it was intended to occur, it never happened.
Yeah. It sounds like it would have been kind of risky if it had. I mean, the internet's written in ink. Everything would have been out there and stayed out there.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, and that's something that I had to be very cognizant of when I went on Kicked in the Dice Bags the first time, because I knew some things they were going to ask me about. I knew they were going to ask me about the fight between me and Adam. I knew up front they were going to ask me about, you know, the stuff that went on with the brilliant gameologists and whatnot. And I knew it's like, whatever I say, you know, I am creating an image for myself. and I have to be prepared to stand by that. And it would have been interesting, because some people are willing to do it. If you get an interview with Bill Coffin, if you want somebody who will go off on Kevin Symbieta, get Bill Coffin on your show. There was no holds barred with that man. Well, enough from me. What's on your guys' minds? New people, what are your questions? People who are established, what are you struggling with?
I've asked you this before, but I'm going to ask it again so that they can hear the answers. We're coming up on our 50th. Kicking the Dice Bags just had their 50th. We tend to kind of, at every year, we mark it because it's right before Gen Con. We're out of Indianapolis, and we just finished up a series that it took us a few months to figure out what we were going to talk about. And the ultimate question is how do you keep coming up with material in any way, shape, or form? What is it? How do you keep coming up with material is the biggest question I think that I know we've dealt with in the last year.
Well, I listened to that episode, and Dan's right. If you keep gaming, you keep buying new games, trying new games, you're going to come up with something new and different. The difference between Rules Light and Crunch, the difference between this character and that character, and then the conflicts that the characters have, the conflicts that the players have, and how do you overcome that to keep a flowing story? Because a lot of times, too, Wayne calls it the Final Fantasy effect, with combat. How do you get that combat going smooth?
It's kind of interesting because I'm listening, I'm reading, sometimes when podcasts pod fade, they just shut down and you really never hear why, unless you happen to be kind of in the know with the people or whatever. Like, Chuck and Lonnie to this day, they never came back and just gave a goodbye episode 100 for Dragon's Landing Inn. But I have read several podcasts that quit who did kind of give sort of their suicide note when they went out, here's why we're quitting. And there is one answer that I saw that I think I've seen a couple times that is just complete BS, which is we ran out of things to say. Really? You do a podcast about storytelling. You've run out of material when you've run out of stories to tell or aspects of stories to examine. If you have nothing more to talk about, here's my answer. Sit down, game, and see what happens. I guarantee you something will come up that you've not dealt with up to this point. And, if you want to say to me, I'm not podcasting more because there's nothing more I care to say, because I'm tired of talking, because I'm burned out on doing it, I get that. I 100% get that. But the few I've read are like, well, there's just nothing more to say, that's just crap.
Why is the internet still growing?
Yeah. So I was very cognizant of that in the beginning. And so one of my original plans, which didn't exactly work out, was to tie it to something that changes, like movies. So we discussed the latest movies as they come out and analyze the plots, because you're not going to run out of new movies that they're making every year.
They're making the same damn movies over and over again.
It gives me more to complain about.
Very much.
Oh, not this again.
Because I was thinking about how some of the TV talk shows that run for years and years and years, it's because they tied their topics to current events.
Right.
Until you run out of current events, you're not going to run out of topics. And I think there's some of that in the gaming. On the other hand, the other side of it is I told a story on one of our latest casts about a bad DM who took away a paladin's mount, and then on a whim went back to the very first episode to listen to what I sounded like in episode 1, and I told the exact same story. And I guarantee that's not the only time I've told it. And so some of it is just repetition. I don't remember that. Every 25 episodes I told that same
and sometimes
story.
viewpoints change too. Like maybe even though in that particular situation you said the exact same damn thing you said before, but people grow, people adapt, people change. So someone who said something 2 years ago, revisiting that topic maybe with a couple different new hosts, bring that topic relevant again.
Well, and I think sometimes a little repetition is okay if it's important enough stuff. I think it took us a dozen or so episodes before that same C.S. Lewis quote about the value of myth stopped coming up in every single episode. Now it comes up in every other episode. We should really just make it part of the website's design. But as far as finding stuff to talk about, we've had a little bit of success asking our fans. We took one episode idea from Line Wielding Ninja, and one from DeMaio. And one of those came through us through Twitter and one through the forums. So
we had good luck with a list. So for a while we were doing genres, and it was easy to sit down and brainstorm this big list of genres, and then every genre was an episode, and we could bring people on who were experts in that genre, or if we felt we knew what it was. Yeah. But then when you run out, you run out. But I mean, that was still worth 15, 20 episodes.
Yeah, that's what we're doing with our Virtues and Vices series. We've got a 14-part series. So
that was something that Ryan Dancy suggested to us when we were earlier on our run. And I was telling him, this is back like episode 30, 40, like, oh, we're going to run out of things to talk about.
Oh, you've known Ryan that long?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Ryan was...
I just met him last year. That's why I said that.
No, I've known Ryan for a long time. Actually, where I first met Ryan was in one of our early episodes. He had posted a list of his gaming predictions for like 2007 or 2008 or something like that. Yeah. And we disagreed with most of it. And actually, by the way, in retrospect, I went back and reviewed that. We were right and he was wrong.
But, nice, Dan.
Yeah, but he responded to it. And we're like, but Mom's the only one that listens to the show. But when he actually responded, so we're like, okay, fine, let's get him on the show. So that's how. But one of the things that he said, because we were going to run out of topics. And the advice he gave us, which is a little different than the advice that I've given, which is just keep gaming, is, but Ryan's a market analyst. He thinks from a different sort of point of view. Was he used the example of Mythbusters. Mythbusters was apparently ready to shut down their doors after about their second or third season because they said, we've run out of myths. We've gone through all the popular urban myths we can think of. We're out of ideas. And one guy said, throw it open. Just start asking the listener or the viewers to send us in myths.
Dirty jobs.
And boom, they're still putting out shows to this day. And it's the same thing. If you run out of ideas, get your listeners involved. Get them to throw you ideas. And some of them are going to be non-starters because there's just not that much to say, or maybe you're not an expert in it or don't have a really strong view on it.
Or it's something you've already covered,
right?
Slightly differently.
Or something that just doesn't quite fit with your show.
Yeah, it just personalities. But, you'll get some gems in there that you can use.
Well, one of the things I like Postcards from the Dungeon, getting the Kickstarters in. Because a lot of the Kickstarters, I don't follow it all that often and stuff. But to listen to something like that, to what's new coming out, what's being developed, and who are these people?
Yeah. The only concern I have about that, I feel bad if it's taken as an endorsement.
Right.
Because the products are varying degrees of quality. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I think it's worth to get this guy a chance to describe what he's working on. But I don't want to be like, and it has our stamp of approval, and you should rush out and spend your money on it. Because it is Kickstarter, there's a certain amount of risk, and you could get what was delivered and say, this is a piece of crap, why you come and buy it.
To your credit, I never heard that. Okay. Just as a way for the community to know, this is what's coming down the pike, check it out.
It's a good point, though, Steve. Brandon and I had a 3-hour knockdown drag-out on Skype over whether or not we wanted to have Kickstarter people on Saving the Game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we were point-counterpoint for a really long time. So,
Keith, you give our podcast a lot of crap for plugs. I've had a lot of our listeners come back and thank us for informing them about things.
The only reason I give you crap about that, because literally it was like 9.5. They started their show, and then 10 minutes later, after all the plugs, then their show actually started. Sure. And that's why. They were even plugging
at the beginning of a movie.
Almost. It was almost. It was just like they were even plugging themselves. I mean, I'm all about sharing the love, but just like wrap it up, dog.
Well, the interesting. I make that note because this forum, Outset Forum, the Fear the Boot Forum, the Facebook. Listening to other podcasters, getting opinions and so forth from them. We really have tried, though we're not perfect, really have tried pushing our plug section as it is back towards the end of the episode. Because listeners also are saying they want to get to the meat of it. What are you guys talking about first off? And but don't be afraid to take criticism. If you do end up doing it, it's all, especially if you're releasing a free product, it's not like your pay's going to get cut for somebody criticizing your podcast.
Well, it was time for your podcast review, and and
We're sorry, we're going in a different direction.
Yeah.
But in that critique, look for trends.
Yeah.
Because you will find a vocal minority that hates anything you are doing. Look for the trends. That's one thing that we had to learn is if you don't listen to anybody, you have become arrogant, you're sitting on your laurels, and you are deservingly about to die as a show. But if you listen to everybody, number one, your show is going to be confused at best. Number two, we found out a lot of people don't know what the hell they want. I mean, people will tell us, "Oh, your show's got to do this, got to do this, got to do this." Then we do it, and everyone's like, "That's terrible. Why did you do this?" Like, you guys told us to do it. But you look for those trends, and then within those trends, you pay attention to them, but you do so while staying true to yourself. Never listen to just what one guy bitches about, because there's one person who will bitch about anything.
Yeah.
But half your listeners are all saying, "Hey, this didn't work." Then pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Ultimately, know that 50 to 60% of most podcasts have at least one part of the format of the discussion, and you're just going to sit and talk because that's the point. I mean, that's what you guys are doing. But one of the things we talked about last year that I still think holds true. He made the mention about you're either going to go to what people listen to or what you're going to enjoy. Also find something, in my opinion, that makes you a little different. And be proud of that difference. I listening to Fear the Boot, they tend to do a banter topic and then a secondary topic and then a main topic. We tend to take a versus topic and a discussion topic. And the Kicked in the Dice Bags folks just argue for an hour.
Pretty much.
But it's what they do, and we know that. Postcards for the Dungeon. These guys have done things from movies to genres, but it's always there. You guys are really good. I love all the different documentation you give to describe what you're talking. The links, you guys are the same way. Saving the Game's the same way.
Well, we worked for a while. Nobody was clicking on anything, so we pared it way down.
Okay, but it was still. It's interesting to see. You can tell what people are willing to do on the front end at first, and then you find out later how much they're willing to do after doing it for some. Nobody cares.
Yeah, that kind of happened with when we started at Players Edition. I was doing all of the audio editing. We had a good separation of labor. I was in charge of the audio stuff. I made sure the podcast sounded as good as possible. I did the small amount of editing needed to make the show a show. And then Adam was supposed to do the show notes because he's a better writer than me. And he can do that a lot faster and do it a little bit more organized, and it saves me from having to do it. Then about after episode 12, that stopped happening. So anything that you see in the RSS feed, So it's funny because we used to do we talked about this. This is the timestamp from this topic, and then all these timestamps and links, and then I'm just like, "Hey, the show's out. It's done. Listen to it. Bye."
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Well, and I was doing these really detailed show notes, they still do, I think, and
yeah, they still do.
I listen to you guys through Stitcher, so I don't see the show notes anymore.
Has everyone switched over to Stitcher?
I am on Stitcher, but that is not my primary.
It's not my primary.
Stitcher? I don't know.
Stitcher is like Pandora. It's a streaming service for podcasts.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you thumbs up and thumbs down thing, and based on that, tries to figure out what you like.
That's an
and
interesting
you can
idea.
star shows and say these are my preferred shows.
And yes, there's an Android app.
It's pretty cool. Going off of our numbers,
Should load up pretty quick.
I'd say probably about 5% of our listenership is off Stitcher.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people.
iTunes still.
Actually, for us now, it's more direct downloads.
Yep.
iTunes has fallen is a close second.
Okay.
But no, Stitcher is notable. So we have to keep things. We have to keep ourselves. We can't agitate Stitcher, but they still only account for a relatively small percentage of our downloads.
Ironically enough, though, of our amount of podcast hosts, I know at least 2 of them use Stitcher instead of other direct downloads or
Dice
something.
Bags
so.
is as many places you can make your show available.
You
is
definitely
to your
want to be
benefit.
on Stitcher.
You definitely want to be on Stitcher.
It doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah, exactly. But the more places for people to get your show, the more potential listeners you could potentially have.
But it also means the more links in your show notes at the bottom where people subscribe via Google Reader or iTunes or via Stitcher or via Google.
Back to the original point about show notes. So I got busy with school and stuff and fell behind, and I was like, okay, I want to go through and get caught up on these, but it's going to take me a while. So I started on it, and then I put out a blog post, I think, and mentioned it a couple of places, like, hey, I'm willing to do this, but are any of you even using this stuff? The overwhelming response was no. Yeah. So it's like, well, why, for us, spend the effort? I mean, you guys are kind of about media and genre, so it makes sense to have all that reference stuff.
Links to things that have been mentioned.
Yeah. In our case, it was more it's more opinion-based, I think, so they didn't care as much.
His is very. It's not timestamped like for the boot, but it's when it comes up and just a link to, like we mentioned this movie. It's the IBM site or Internet Movie Database site.
IMDb.
That's where most of my links go.
I realized most of my stuff was just going to Wikipedia too. So.
That's only as good as the last author.
If you're downloading a podcast, likelihood of people being able to also use search engines also strong too. Yeah. So I mean, if they're smart enough to download or subscribe to a podcast, they're probably going to be able to go, I should look this up on Google to figure out where all this stuff is.
I will say, as a podcast listener, it's very likely that you'll mention something, and I'll think at the time, I want to look this up later, but I will forget the name of whatever it is you mentioned, but I will remember to go look in the show notes for a link.
Yeah. So I tend not to put links. I used to, but I don't put links for D&D anymore. I figure everyone knows. But I will make sure to put links for independent games.
Yeah,
right. Like everyone knows D&D, everyone knows Star Wars, but they may not have heard of whatever 1001 Nights or Apocalypse World or Dungeon World.
So try and separate out the stuff that's a little more obscure and just link to that.
Yeah, the stuff that's going to be harder to find.
Might be a good middle ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you get into that. Well, I know it's slim, because if you're looking for a gaming podcast, you probably have some sort of idea about gaming. Then you're looking at how much do you assume about your listener if they're new?
Yeah, not much. I usually only cut the big ones like D&D.
Okay.
But I always put in GURPS, Sea Tracks and Games.
Yeah.
Anything I don't think is a 800-pound gorilla. You guys didn't always have timestamps in your show
No,
notes.
when we started off, the show notes, they had the links, but they were more almost like a prose format. It was just like, here's a description of what we talk about in this show. And then we picked up the timestamps actually from somebody else. I don't remember who it was, but some other show was doing them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, because there was a talk of a fourth generation kind of audio that would allow you to actually bookmark the audio and imprint links and pictures. But the problem was no standard ever came out of that. You had the MPEG-4, which would only work on certain platforms, and you had the WMA, which would only work on certain platforms. You didn't have this ubiquitous platform independent thing like you do with the MP3s. And so we never went anywhere with it. So it just never happened. So yeah, we started putting in timestamps, not for every comment, but at least for the major topics. So if people are just looking for, well, where was it they talked about this? Or, okay, this topic just doesn't interest me. Maybe they'll at least stick around. They'll just move the slider forward by 5 or 10 minutes to something else. But then the links we put in is anything we don't think they'll remember. If we give long lists, like when we did the show on games for kids, I mean, that was like 20, 30 games. Well, there's no way in hell anyone's going to remember more than one or two of those titles, if even. And so we just but we knew there were parents that were going to go back there and want to find that list and look at those games and decide which they did. And so, but I agree with the observation that show notes don't have an inherent value simply by being there. There has to be something contained in the show notes that either A, they didn't get from the audio, or B, aren't going to remember from the audio.
There is one more advantage, though. It's search engine optimization.
That
was never my intention, but there's some episodes that get a lot of inbound links because of the content in the show notes.
That's a good point.
You get that from the strangest places, though.
Yeah, you
do. My favorite one that we got for Saving the Games website was somebody was looking for traditional versus contemporary forms of the Lord's Prayer compared in a Venn diagram. I took them to a blog post I'd done about how much I like traditional worship services. I kid you not.
That's awesome.
That's great.
I'm like, it's too bad you can't like go back to those people because I want to know why they were searching for that.
Yeah.
There's no way that conversation would have been.
This one
fascinating.
hits our forums more than our show notes. I don't know a huge amount about our show notes. First, once in a rare while, I'll go through our inbound phrase and keyword stuff and post that in the forums.
Yeah.
Man, the crap people find our website off of. I mean, the top hits, like the top 3 or 4 ones you expect. Fear the Boot. Fear the Boot is one word. RPG podcast, whatever. But then it just descends into insanity from there.
Can you give us some examples?
Not off the top of my head, but if you guys check the forums, we'll try to post one in the next week or two. I'll do one of those.
Well, one of your topics, the big one, is always apples to apples combinations.
Oh yes, apples to apples combinations is always high in there. That's always high up in there.
I can only, and now that Cards Against Humanity's out, I can only imagine how bad it's getting.
Yeah.
Then there's a variety of names of hot women and whatnot, and I always try to figure out where is this coming up in the forum.
I thought you said you had control over that.
Attack of the Spammers.
I don't stop people from talking about it.
True.
I mean, we don't allow them to post porn, but I don't stop them from talking about it.
Yeah. So Kicked in Dice Bags has a couple of interviews they've been sitting on for a long time. Like, not interviews that have taken place, but like I've gotten in contact with Keith Baker.
Yeah.
That was like 8 months ago, but like just time never really got there. The other reason that kind of kept me from pursuing it to actually get it done is what is the consideration to your guest? Do you give them a list of sample questions that we're going to ask? And especially an issue with my show is that there is a large population of the community that has not listened to the reboot shows. That they think Kicked in Dice Bags and they think John and Landriff Toilet Hour.
I know. I had to actually
vouch for us.
Bet you guys on a few interview subjects who came over to me and like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And I had to bet, no, they really are what they used to
They're
be.
not. Yeah. So one, how do we shake the stigma? I don't think we can ever. And
No.
two, do you when do you guys do your interview series?
Yeah.
Do you go like, these are the questions we're going to ask you? I know the guy that was doing the Shadowrun stuff gave you an outline, which
Yes.
was you were stoked on. But like, what would be
the way that we usually approach it is this: one, okay, we find a person who's available to talk or interested in talking to. Sometimes they contact us, sometimes we contact them. Sometimes there's somebody in the middle who suggests the two sides meet, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But first thing we ask internally is, do we have anything that we really want to talk to this person about? There's been a few interviews we've never done, so we have nothing to talk to this person about. There's just nothing to say. I mean, not that we dislike them. It's just, I don't know what the hell we'd say to them. I've got one like that I'm sitting on right now where I don't know if I have anything to ask them, which is the cast of Standard Action. Got nothing against any of them, but I just don't know if we'd have anything to ask them. The second thing that I do is I will tell them our format, and everyone's got to pick their own format. Our format is we don't do a Q&A. I tell them, look, this is just going to be kind of a free-form discussion. All I have in front of me is a handful of talking points. So if things start to slow down, or if they finish a subject, or if there's a subject I feel that, okay, we just can't have this guy on and not ask him about this, I can go back to. The third step, and this is a critical step, because when you have an interview subject on, you get two benefits. One of them is content for your show. The other is added eyes. People that are fans of them that may come over to you to keep up with them and then stick around. Keep them thinking about you. This is something else that Dancy taught us very early on. It was great advice and has worked wonderfully for us. After the interview is over and it's posted, I get back in touch with the person. I say, thank you for being on the show. Here's a link to the show. Here's a link to the forum area where people will be discussing it in case you want to get involved. We appreciate you taking the time to do it. We'd also appreciate it if you'd be willing to repost this on any of your stuff so people can come hear what you had to say with us.
Yeah.
You know, your Twitter feed or whatever you've got. The final thing we then do, and this was the one that Ryan really pushed us on, and he was right to do so, was we then go back and say to them, as a thanks for appearing on our show, Here's a link to our Cafe Press store. Pick anything you want. Give me your mailing address, T-shirt size if necessary, and I'd like to send you something just as a way of saying thank you for being on the show. Not only does this show a level of professionalism, it shows a level of gratitude, and on top of that, I've now got Monty Cook with a Fear the Boot mug sitting on his desk every freaking day. There's value.
Yeah, exactly.
It builds brand awareness.
I just found out Kingston Dice Bags has shirts. I did not know that.
The only person I gave any questions to in advance was when we did the interview with the guys for the Pathfinder MMO. I got in touch with Ryan. I said, okay. Ryan, I said, we're homies and all that. I said, but there's a lot of hard questions being asked about your guys' Kickstarters and about the MMO. I mean, you kickstarted the Tech Dump and now you're kickstarting the MMO. You know, it's not really clear how this money is being spent. There's a lot of hard questions being asked. I said, we want to talk to you guys about it to give you guys a chance, because you guys are getting attacked all over the internet. We want to give you a chance to kind of come on and say your side of the story, but I cannot do that if I don't ask any hard questions. Because if I ask no hard questions, it does you no favors because of the fact that you're not answering any of your critics. It does us no favors because it looks like all we did was just throw you softballs as a favor.
Yeah.
And so we asked for Mark Kalmus. We asked for Mark Kalmus, who's one of their lead developers. And we told them in advance, these are some of the questions we're going to ask you. Be prepared. Usually I don't. I might give them some ideas.
Like
talking points. I might give them some kind of high-level talking points of, here's kind of the things we want to talk about.
Yeah.
But I don't have to narrow it down because it's never adversarial.
Yeah.
We don't bring the people on the show to just blindside them.
Yeah.
The one time we did, I forewarned them, we're going to come at you a couple times during the course of the interview because we have to. Otherwise, there's no legitimacy to the interview.
Yeah.
We actually had two really good opportunities, actually a couple really good interviews come up, but one of them was Tracy Hickman. We actually met him in person at Gen Con last year, and he was only able to record for a half an hour, but we didn't even get a chance to tell him, or ask him, well, what do you want to talk about? We just basically said, we want to talk about storytelling, and he was like, well, I can talk about that for hours. So that helped out a lot there. First, and also the whole sending them something from the Cafe Press store, love it, we'll be stealing it. I had never thought of that either. Yeah,
we need to get a Cafe Press store.
It's good business to do that.
Yes.
But we also worked out one with Bob Salvatore, and that was all through a third-party person, and we didn't really have a format picked out yet. The first question I had was, what can we not talk about specifically? And the biggest thing for them was D&D Next. We can't talk about D&D Next right now. Okay, that's fair. But having talked with him in another Google Hangout for something at one or whatever, he does not like answering the question, how do you properly pronounce Drizzt Do'Urden? Because he doesn't care how you pronounce it because you're still talking about it. It doesn't matter how it's said.
Yeah.
So we jokingly started the entire interview off by slowly asking him, how do you properly pronounce Lolth? And we made the ridiculous pause on purpose, and it broke the ice big time.
Yeah.
Because you want to find out about who you're interviewing. Yeah. Find out the things that he's been asked a ton of times. That's what's going to happen. Our conversation ended up talking about the Colts and Patriots, which is really hard to talk about in Indianapolis, and he's from Boston, so that tells you something. But these guys, especially with gaming industry folks, they're willing to talk and talk and talk and talk. As long as you're willing to put in the effort, do the discussion, do the research beforehand. And it looks like we're going to have cookies. And I want a cookie.
$3. And we have, right now we have chocolate or vanilla.
Got change?
Yeah, they're good. I did have dessert. It was apple.
You want to just add it on there?
I'm just going to lip off a bottle of cookies, right?
How many for this one? You got one?
Yeah.
Your food looks delicious.
They are.
It does not disappoint.
Soft and gooey.
Yeah,
These are
things are
chocolate.
What are these called again?
apocalypse cookies.
That's right, the Apocalypse Cookie, live at Fear the Con. As we all sit here and munch on. So I hope somebody else has something to say about interviewing.
I do.
Good.
The apocalypse.
We for a while we went back and forth, and
Or at least not.
I don't know if we're going to stick to this for forever, but the tack we've taken on having people on is we don't do actual interviews. We find interesting people with something interesting to say about a topic that we'd like to discuss anyways, but they know more about than we do, and get them on to talk about it.
The way Dan said he does interviews basically sounds like that.
Yeah, a little bit. But with us, it's even more informal. They're part of the hosting team. They're a guest host, not an interviewee. So we all, we're all sitting in different parts of the country anyways. My guest host and I, or my co-host and I aren't even in the same time zone. I don't think any of the guest hosts.
That's fine. When you come
Dan
back,
is.
you come back.
Dan's south of me, but he's in the same time zone. But we've only done 3 so far. 2 of them are actually here at the con, Dan and Shannon Dixon. And it's worked out well for us because at that point everybody's kind of sitting on the same proverbial side of the table, and they just kind of relax, and you can just have an interesting discussion with them. The one place where that can backfire is if the person's too interesting, you might wind up with a lot of audio to edit. That happened to us with Ben Rome when we had him on. He was he's the BattleTech Assistant Line Director, I think is his title. We edited it down to like 2 hours. We had 3 hours with Ben, and we could have kept going. And it was all really good stuff. He's an amazingly intelligent and interesting guy. We want to have him on again, but be ready for that to happen. It'll spiral on you sometimes if you get really good quality guests.
That sounds like a good time to just make a 2-parter and take a break next week.
We did. We made a 2-parter out of it.
Stacking up episodes is key. When we first started doing episodes, I was trying to get at least 4 episodes in the can, so I could just release them one at a time. We don't have to rush to record again. Fortunately, Maze decided to post our feed a week ahead of schedule, so I had to start catching up. And ever since then, we record maybe once a month, if that. Which we'd like to get more regular, but all of our hosts are in completely different portions of the country. I'm in California. Adam's in Minnesota. Chad is in St. Louis, obviously. And then Maze, when he shows up, he's in Connecticut. So literally, I'm managing hosts in 2 different time zones, including myself. So it's just super tough to try and keep it all.
Yeah,
keep it all
I'm up
sorted
in
out.
Northern Illinois. Grant and Brandon are both over on the Eastern Seaboard. Grant's in South Carolina, and Brandon's in Maryland.
But you know what? I want to make a statement about the putting in the can.
Yeah.
We started our first 8-9 months was, all right, we're going to sit down for 4 hours, knock out 3 episodes, because we release every 2 weeks. Just because when we started this thing up, it was we know we don't have the schedule to release weekly. We just don't. We can't get enough people together. We have to. That's key. If you're going to do a podcast and you're going to make one, set your schedule, stick to the schedule. No one cares the amount of time as long as you stick to it. If it's once a month, it's once a month. If it's once a week, it's got to be once a week. Be clear on that. And if you're going to change it, tell them. That's all they care about. They want to know it's going to happen. As long as you communicate with them, you're showing respect to them, that whatever that may be.
It goes to your listeners, too.
It does.
Because, for example, I listen to a ton of podcasts. Last time I had Dan on Kicked in Dice Bags, I figured out I listened to about 30 or 40 different podcasts. Not every week, but I at least have them in my iTunes folder, subscribed. And I know my favorite podcast when they drop. I know Giant Bombcast is every Wednesday. I know there's going to be a new show.
Heck yes.
And I look forward to it every week. That show's amazing. Especially when they don't talk about games. It's amazing. I can just listen to them banter for hours. And that's the thing. Sometimes you don't even really need a topic. Last night. So last night, if you weren't aware, Kicked in Dice Bags, we started a tradition last year where we do a live, air quotes, live episode Last year we did it in the lobby of the hotel, the Drury Inn. This year, since the soundproof conference room was open,
which was so awesome.
That was amazing because we could do stupid stuff that we couldn't do on the last one.
True.
And we were just like, we're recording. You want to pile in, gather around the table, show up, let's hang out and talk about stuff. And literally, we had like one topic that we had fleshed out. When we got around the table, like, what does anyone want to talk about? And we can still just banter. I mean, banter is not a bad thing.
Well,
format is good. Format helps kind of add structure. But if you have people, if I have Chad and Maze on an episode, I'm messed up because they can talk if Chad doesn't get sleepy for like 3-4 hours.
True.
Last time,
the trick with Chad is shutting him up.
And the thing with. Especially like last episode, I was on a 5-hour Skype call with Maze and this guy Alex Jazoba. He's on the Facebook group.
Yeah.
And literally, and like the show was about an hour and a half. Chad went to bed as per normal. Kicked in the dice bags. Show ending. Chad's going to go to sleep. That's the end of the show. But then Maze and Alex, I stopped talking because I was starting to do other things. But they talked for like...
They are unemployed right now. That's all they can do.
Yeah. And it's just like, I was like the proverbial audio fly on a wall because I was just like starting to like work with the episode and edit and do that stuff, get it set up. And I was like, I'll just let these guys talk because I really got nothing else to do.
Well, back to putting things in the can.
Yeah.
What we come to find out is that sitting down for 4-5 hours because we have a very regularly late host, Big Don. And we're always sitting down longer, and 4 hours will drain you.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you're just sitting and talking. You could be talking about 3 completely different things. You could be talking about the same thing for that long. I mean, it could be draining playing game. We're at a gaming convention, and that's the same type of thing can happen.
Yeah.
But when you're sitting there and putting things in the can, it's helpful. Like right now, we've got 2 in the can, 1 in the computer. That, yes, I know it's late, whatever. That was splitting into 2 parts because we knew the con was going on. We also know that Memorial Day weekend's coming up, so there is a possibility I may use this so I don't have to record anything. Not gonna lie, it's just one less thing I have to do now.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask if I could get a copy of that recording. Anyway,
absolutely. And with that being said, you've got to find out what your co-hosts prefer. I prefer being the producer of the show, and I'm the one with all the gear. I want to do it. I want us to sit down every 2 weeks and record. If we happen to record 2 episodes at this time, and I put one in the can, cool. We'll be back to. But I want us to do it every 2 weeks for 2 hours to sit down, pop a recording down, and be done with it because it's such a drain to sit and talk and put things in the can for so long. Sometimes. Other times, even if it's 5 hours later.
Dinner.
Man, that would be a great time to record a podcast. Just hang a mic over the table and just let's see what happens.
But think about it. You're at Thanksgiving dinner amongst your relatives.
You've got a lot of things to put in the can.
You've got a lot of things. You're talking for hours, even during the football game, what have you. And after a while, it's like, okay. And turkey sits in, and all of a sudden, everybody's sitting there. It looks like, everybody died up.
Yeah, and we're done. You know what I mean? What about you guys? Postcards. What do you guys do it? Try and do it on a schedule, or
yes.
That's why I said try. I know how this works.
We get together every Thursday night around 8:30 or 9 o'clock. All 3 hosts are in different states. I'm in Massachusetts. Jeb moved from Mass to Ohio, and then Mikey joined our cast, and he lives in
Indiana.
And so luckily we're all in the same time zone. That helps. But everybody's super busy. They both have kids and families and everything. So we can't do 4-hour blocks. Usually if we get 90 minutes, we're doing good. And that's with some pre and some post discussion.
Right.
And about 55 minutes of recording. What else were you asking?
It's quite. Oh no, I was just. Do you guys put in a can, or you just try and put
I've
the
got
one?
stuff sitting on my drive.
Oh, okay.
Because editing is much more tedious than recording. I enjoy recording with these guys. I like talking to them.
What's your editing ratio? How long does it take you to edit a minute of audio? For me, it varies. On a real easy show, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
On a real bad show, about 4.
That's it. And the truth is, if I was hyper-disciplined like a machine and sat down and just did nothing but editing, I could get it cranked out in a couple hours.
Keith and I are
But it's
lazy.
really hard to do that.
We're incredibly lazy with our editing.
Yeah, I'm going to look this up for a minute. Somebody mentioned something. Let me Google that. Just see, there's a lineage.
The only time I showed off editing was when May showed up halfway through an episode, but I edited his dialogue to match up with the other topics. After that, I was like, I'm not doing that again ever. It doesn't sound that good to begin with anyways. So
the most interesting part of editing, though, was that because I keep editing out ums and ahs,
yes,
I stopped doing it. It's like, I do the least number of ums and ahs as anyone on my cast because I'm the one who has to listen to all that stuff.
Well, and you've also gotten better. Like, that's the thing about podcasting that sometimes we take for granted. Like, before I started listening and doing podcasts, I didn't consider myself a strong public speaker. And then by listening to tons of podcasts and by doing the sheer act of podcasting, I consider myself a very strong speaker. Like, I don't care getting up in front of a group and doing like a presentation. Like, that helped out collegially, like when I was going through college, because like literally I had one of my professors ask me if I was a radio announcer, just from like the way I was talking, the way that I was being energetic with the way I was talking, instead of going like, well, this graph shows the influx to, whatever. It's just, it doesn't, But yeah, there's a strong, you get stronger with your speaking. You say less ums, you say less uhs and stuff like that. You still do it from time to time, but when we did the first Player's Edition, and we listen to a Player's Edition now, they're still there, but they're less frequent because we've gotten stronger. First of all, as speakers, and we've gotten more comfortable with. I know by the way Chad is inflecting that he's about to stop talking, so I can prepare a thought.
It's like choking on something.
Yeah. Like, okay,
someone punched
it's getting later in the evening. I can slip in there and
finally
say something.
taken effect.
Yeah. But it's like you just get to know the mannerisms of your host. Yeah. And that especially helps when you're doing remote recordings.
I am horrible about the and ah and like editing, but I have the bonus. In my opinion, I consider it a major bonus and a blessing that 95 to 99% of my hosts live 10 minutes, 15 minutes away because we did it on purpose that way. We have people come in every once in a while. Dan's been on the episode. All our interviews have either been done through Skype or Google Hangout and whatever that is. And again, because of this forum last year, I'm quite happy with the way we're handling remote recordings. But to me, the and ahs and likes, yes, they're annoying. I can't stand listening to people do it in a public speaking venue. But from the podcast element, because I know these guys, the and ahs and it's part of the natural conversation.
Normal.
I have no problem. There's sometimes I've done it.
Wow.
That was
Any
intense.
brains in that one?
But I've gone through the process of removing them every once in a while. The biggest amount of editing I ever had to do was a couple of times we had a baby crying, a couple of times the dogs had barked, and the first time we had Mikey Mason on the show. I love him to death, but man.
My old microphone used to pick up train noise from a train that runs about a block down the street from us that the engineers seem to like to test their horn right as they're hitting the end of the street, so it reverbs off all the houses and comes down.
Nice.
One of these days we're going to release like an April Fool's episode that's nothing but the cut train footage, but the new microphone doesn't pick it up anymore. Yeah.
Is it?
So Grant will kill me for telling you guys all this, but if you ever see a Saving the Game episode entitled Railroading, just know what you're getting into.
Railroad. I got to tell you a funny story. So I'm recording with Mikey and Jeb, and I see a bunch of flashing lights go past my house, and then sirens, and like by the third one, I knew something was going on. So I tell the guys, like, it's a recording, who cares? Just give me a couple minutes, I'm going to check this
episode.
out. Did you?
Yeah, I remember this one.
So I run out there, and I come back, well, they kept talking, and it's all recorded. And they're making fun of me, and then Jeb says, on the mic, Steven, when you go to edit this, keep me a message. I come back, okay, guys, I'm ready to go. And then it was like 3 weeks later when I did the editing that I heard the little so it could be fun.
Yeah.
We've thrown stuff in like, oh, we're going to cut that, and Grant's like, nope, that's staying in the episode, including your comment that we're going to cut it. So.
We have a nuclear option on that, which is when you want to make sure something gets cut, in the middle of it, drop an N-word and it ain't nuclear. That guarantees it gets cut. Say something so unbelievably beyond what your show is willing to run that it forces. This is a little tip coming from the editor.
Don't have that option whatsoever with my show. I don't edit.
Yeah, and you see, the thing is, we try for such a high clean standard that it's easy to do that accidentally. So
Yes. I'm glad to know that we're not the only clean show on the market now. Yeah, it's so good.
Well, I think we're
trying to keep it PG-13.
You do.
It's not per se clean, but it's not.
We go for like PG or less, though. So.
Yeah.
Right. No.
You're doing it for similar, obviously, because of the whole Christianity in gaming. It just kind of, you're trying to set an example there. We're doing it because not the majority, but probably a fourth of our listeners go to church with us. So if I'm going to, share this with your children.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that their children will listen to it and go, Mommy, what was blah, 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 blah. I'd really prefer not that.
Yeah.
So you don't recommend kicking the dice bag?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Not to church members. Some I do.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, saving the game. I forgot mine.
I think that brings up another point, though, which is that.
Actually, here, I got a whole box of these.
There we go.
Grant was like, use as many of these as you can.
Just make me
Before the con, a Vistaprint box showed up. So, everybody's getting one.
Oh,
Does anyone have a tablet that has decent speakers on it? So I've got something funny I can play for you.
Kind of decent.
Oh, that.
Here's probably
that one you already, Steve.
Dance Private Hell?
Yeah.
Mine does not have stereo.
I've listened to that before.
It
It doesn't need to be stereo. Just
Oh, is this the
Yeah, Dance Private Hell. For anyone, has anyone here ever not heard Dance Private Hell?
No.
I don't think I have.
No, I don't.
All right.
I've never played it on the air.
Want a browser?
Okay. Yeah.
There you go.
Your poor Transformer has had some experience, hasn't it?
It has.
It doesn't
Okay,
transform.
why don't you have S.C. Lewis's quote on it?
I don't know, you'd have to ask Dan. He designed them. Or, not Dan, Grant.
Himself.
No, that's mine.
Make more Cafe Press shirts. And
Get a Cafe Press store open.
we have one open. I just didn't know about it.
So somebody actually is like administering.
Somebody's profiting on this, and it's none of us. What the heck?
I mean, Maze pays for our feed, so he can profit off that as much as he
True.
wants.
Yeah, all the money that has come back to me on Cafe Press is purely from people I know purchasing the shirts because I've watched it. Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah.
Most of them my hosts.
Yeah.
I'm not. I got one.
I want to design a new logo for us, though. We've had that street sign with the dude getting kicked in the nuts for.
I know a guy. He's here. That
John.
John. He's a 3D graphics guy. Does really good work.
I need to hit him up.
Okay. Do that. I'm not saying he'll do it, but
No,
he probably will. We have a backup logo that he made of ours.
That new logo is pretty.
Yeah, that actually got one of the artists for Control Alt Delete webcomic.
Yeah, you told me about that.
Hey, yeah, he actually Tony, one of our hosts, actually paid for it. Paid $100, I think, for it, and we got free use of it, so we have used it. Loading Gmail.
What's going on? Are you reading my email?
No, this is my email.
That's why you gave him a browser.
Let's see. That's just. Oh, there it goes. Here. It says organized a little differently.
Well, while we're waiting on Private Hell, I'm just going to go ahead and close this recording out here because there's been a lot of really cool information that whether or not this goes up, please no, I don't really have any profit in this whatsoever.
Well, you're a podcaster, so we know you're not getting any
Exactly.
profit. So
all these sweet, non-existent podcasting money?
That's right.
Yeah.
So
All the hookers and blows.
let's see.
All kinds.
Postcards from the Dungeon, Fear the Boot, the Established Facts, Saving the Game podcast, Kick the Dice Bags, and Dungeons and Randomness are all represented in this. So I will at least put it up. If I put it up, I may just upload it to archive.org like I'm doing now and say, hey, here you guys go. Here's a link if you guys want to listen to the first hour.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at podcasting. It's always interesting to hear what other issues, what other things the guys have to deal with during the recording process. Again, we want to thank you for listening. We look forward to your feedback on this episode and our next one, episode 50. It's coming up very soon, hopefully to take a little bit more of a personal look at who we are as gamers. Also, make sure you visit us at theestablishedfacts.com or our Facebook page, facebook.com/theestablishedfacts. Make sure you check us out on the Fear the Boot forums. And as always, if you'd like to show some financial support, visit our Cafe Press store at cafepress.com/castingrobot. Until the next time, game on.